Hello, everyone. My name is Cena, the co founder of High Value Author and the host of High Value Speaker podcast. And today, me joining is Mr. Akshobh Giridharadas, a journalist, an international affairs commentator, a speaker, a TEDx speaker, which is the most important thing for me. Akshobh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for having me, and thank you to High Value Podcast.
Now, Akshab, let me jump in right away. We were talking a little bit right before, and I'm wondering, you talk about many different things, and you're sharing your message in different kind of ways. What was and when was the time when you maybe started to take that more seriously? When was the start of you sharing your message? For example, using different tools. When was that, and what were those tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. I started my career in broadcast journalism with ESPN Star Sports, that's ESPN Asia Pacific and Singapore. And the funny part about that was most people, when they're 21, 22, 23, don't know what the first jobs are, or sometimes they know. I got my first job through a television show called Dream Job, where ESPN was searching for the next sports broadcaster. And I walked in accidentally, and my friend walked in. And I walked in dressed like a college kid when people are suited, booted, waxed. So it's like a watered down version of American Idol. And I just did a little sports skit, and one thing led to another, and I got through all these rounds, and it led to me going to journalism school, led to me getting an internship at ESPN Singapore. So that's when I just realized that the ability to just be me on the spot, share my passion, really started something over there. But the funny part is, I always say ironically, as but the television show I got my job for was a dream job. The actual job was a nightmare job, because being in the television newsroom is like being on the trading floor without money. There are screens and people shouting, but there's no money. And very earlier on, I realized that I was boxing myself in television, but I still had an outlet to communicate. And I was trying to find other outlets for it. But when I was in Singapore doing sports, it was a very siloed environment. It's like going skiing in Florida. You just can't do that. It's just not much of a market. But then I started going to various events at universities and think tank things. And I just found the concept of just participating in a panel, the idea of communicating, the idea of just being able to share a vision thought, the idea to be able to have a conversation like this was so profound. So I realized, okay, just because your title by day is ESPN Star Sports and broadcast doesn't mean that's the only platform, right? And especially a platform like those can be restricted. So I think 10, 12 years ago, I started realizing that leverage this convergence of media, leverage this audiovisual thing, because the internet became such a thing. And podcasts weren't a thing then, but now they are. So I think that it was the start of this transformative journey of start using a 360-degree approach to spread your message.
And how did you discover something like a public speaking? When did you start to appear on stages in front of people? When did you realize that that's the thing and you can spread your message that way?
You know what's funny? If I look back at my childhood, I would say till I was 6 or 7, I was probably a little shy. But then I started coming up. Like there's always this meme about having Indian parents when relatives or guests come over, they make you either sing, dance, sing a song, like whatever talent. Like in some ways, you feel like a dancing monkey at circus. On cue, you're supposed to perform. And I would always tell these jokes, and my parents like, oh, tell them a joke or do this imitation. So by forced nature, I have to do all these imitations in front of people. And then I kind of realized that liked doing some of that. In the sense, I found myself very liberated. And in school, there was a lot of this elocution and dramatics, and I enjoyed those performances because you don't get those very often. And just being on stage, you get to play an alter ego, getting elocution. It's a rush of blood to the head, but you just enjoy it. So I always had that in me, but I didn't know exactly what to make a career out of it, right? Because I grew up at a time in India where your careers were doctor, lawyer, engineer, or you're a dead loss. And I was very fortunate to have a father, despite being an engineer, to not force me into those paths. But I always thought I'd want to be a lawyer because I like debating, and I was part of all these debate societies. So even in college, I used to debate, I used to do quizzes. Quizzes, not so much public speaking, but just things that would be intellectually stimulating. And I think when I had this opportunity with ESPN just to come on the show, then I realized, oh goodness me, because I could really do something with broadcasting journalism, and it's not just public speaking for the sake of public speaking. It's because having ideas and thoughts to share, wanting to have conversations with people. And for a long time, it was me being the interviewer. So this is nice to have a role reverse. So I think it started early, and it's been going on ever since.
So you think it's kind of like more natural for you than usual than for most people, right? Because you had this whole journey coming up. It seems like for with most people that I talk to who got to the TEDx stage, they didn't have these uh, incentives and opportunities. Not all of us. We had opportunities, right? But I mean, practices when we were 6, 7, 10, 15 years old. Do you think that's like it's more natural for you to speak on a stage than for most people?
Yes and no. Yeah, I think there's definitely the practice, but it's always the stage changes. It's almost like, like say when you're a sports star, you practice growing up, you go through all the coaching, go to training, suddenly you're thrown into a stadium in front of all these people, and the pressure changes, right? So you know what you've done. You practice, you perform well, you're good. That's why you're selected. But then suddenly it's the nerves and the pressures. So public speaking, you can do it, but then suddenly it becomes TEDx, and the TED stage is something else. And I was very fortunate having done this twice. And the first time I did it when I did it when my friend in Singapore, who was running TEDx NTU, invited me to come and speak. And I was like, wow, this is such a big platform. This is a platform where Bill
Actually,
Gates
when was
said,
that? What time
that
was
was
that?
2016. That was 2016. I did my first TEDx in 2016 in Singapore. It was TEDx NTU, so shout out to that team. NTU is one of Singapore's leading universities. And actually, to backtrack a little bit on that, I had just come across TED when I moved to Singapore, and I was telling you when it's only at ESPN, I found myself losing my passion for sports, not enjoying it as much. And then I met these friends of mine who were curating the TED platform, and they're like, "Do you want to come be part of TED and like just help organize?" And I said, and I remember going for my first TEDx in 2011, and the speeches were so profound, and I just felt both moved and a little small that day, thinking, what am I doing at my work? Doing this when people are talking about all these big ideas, I should be doing something much bigger. I don't know if I've done anything bigger, but that started in since 2011, started getting me thinking about doing TEDx, like how powerful this platform was. And 5 years later, after attending multiple TEDx's, my friend said, "Hey, do you want to come to TEDx this year?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll come." He said, "No, but as a speaker." Then suddenly I was like, I froze. I'm like, what have I done? Because these are like Bill Gates and Bill Clinton and Mark Zuckerberg and Al Gore and the who's who of the world come and speak on this. But he's like, no, I want you to speak on journalism. I want to speak about ideas you're passionate about. I want you to speak on the theme that year was Through the Looking Glass. It was about breaking stereotypes and misconceptions. And he said, you're in the journalism field. Can you shatter some of the stereotypes or misconceptions or shed light? And initially, I was just overawed by the occasion. But then I just thought, that's the beauty of TED and TEDx. It's not about who you are, it's about what you have to say. And I remember this talk about two women who became friends. One lost her son in the 9/11 towers. The other was one of the mothers of the pilot who flew it. Neither of these women would necessarily be in the news for having cured cancer, sending rockets to the moon, or becoming billionaires. But their story was about how they became friends through very different people in different cultures and connected by an incident on very different sides, but became friends and about friendship overcoming hate. And I was like, this is amazing. And I saw all the other TED Talks of people I wouldn't have heard of otherwise. But it's about what the idea was to share. And that really inspired me saying, it's not about who you are, it's about what you have to say. And I thought that was a very profound thing about what the TED platform has done. And I'm just so grateful to TED and having small affiliates like TEDx where people like me can get up on stage.
Oh, Shab, we got that into that so fast, but let's stay in there. Let's stay in that about the TEDx talk. So you did it twice. You did that first time in 2016. When was the second time?
2019. 2019 was in the US, 2016 was in Singapore. And
So
I
between
almost had
these
the chance to
speeches,
beg your pardon. Yeah, go on.
sure. So between these speeches, right? Not many people do it twice. Almost nobody does it twice, right? Very small percentage of people who do their speech twice. First of all, why did you decide to do it not once, but twice? You must have a strong reason behind that.
Yeah, so the first time was I was invited to speak, and it was amazing. It was at a university which I never attended, but I really got to know the team really well. and I thought they did a phenomenal job organizing it. And I thought it was a very liberating and cathartic experience. The second one was 3 years later, and I feel like with everything, experience, practice was perfect because I'd done it once. I wasn't overawed. In fact, it was at a university I was studying at. I went for my second master's. It was at Tufts University in Massachusetts. But to be eligible to speak at that, you have to be affiliated with the university, either alumni, a student, a professor, faculty, someone or the other. So because I was already a student, and they sent me emails saying if you want to speak at TEDx, let me know. And I said sure, let me see what. And I just said I expressed interest. But what really helped is like your form. There was a thing of if you've done past talks, and I had done past talks, one of them being TEDx. So no one else had done a TEDx before among the speakers that year, and the fact I'd done it helped a lot more for them to get more confidence that okay, this person has something that they want to share. I think what really inspired me on the second time is I think I had grown a lot more. I was in my second master studying with a really phenomenal set of cohort of students and a phenomenal intellectual professors. So you grow a lot more. So I had a lot more insight to share. I'd become 3 years older, 3 years allegedly smarter, allegedly wiser. I would like to think so. The jury's still out on that one. And I felt I wanted to modify my talk a little more. I think I had the chance to almost do a third one, but it was the pandemic, so that got cancelled. So we'll never know if that would ever come to fusion. Fruition, maybe the third somewhere else. Who knows? But it would have been in India, and I thought I would have done it in one in each of the countries I've lived in, which would have been nice. But when I did the second time, it was very different formats, but the same concept of a good 15-minute speech of an idea you're passionate about. And I think my second one came out a little better because I was a little more older, experienced, and perhaps my topic had a lot more heft in it. But I'll let you and others be the judge of that.
Well, I was judging it. I was listening to it with intent. I was laughing. I was walking around. It was very interesting. But the other thing that was interesting for me is, I was almost following you throughout the whole talk when you said, well, it's almost like you're building this tension and you're building these different concepts throughout your talk, and then at the end you almost like, so here's why I'm sharing this, right? It's like you broke it down so beautifully. Now, most people who do a speech like that, right, for them is a cycle of thinking, anxiety, it being a challenge, preparation, constant practice, making sure every joke is the one that people laugh at. Was that journey the same for you? Let's say the second time, right? The second time you did that, you already practiced it. You knew the process and how it works, and the format. Was it something similar for you, or how was that challenge like look for you?
Definitely was a challenge as well. Because the first time I did it, so the good thing about TEDx is, and I think the two times I've done it, and I think it's part of the format. They assign you a speaker coach, not so much as a person who is a public speaker, but the good thing is because it's curated in such a way where they have to make sure it stays on theme and no one curses or uses profanity, and obviously there's a post production element of it, but they want to make sure it stays on theme, right? Because the idea of TEDx is it's not just you record in a room like what you and I are doing. You have to have a live audience. So the people who see it live and the rest of the world sees it on TEDx's YouTube channels or wherever they may view it. So just to make sure the live and everything is okay, you have someone else, and I found that very helpful because the idea about doing it's natural to have that anxiety because firstly, let me put it this way: there's no one who doesn't have some form of stage fright, right? It's how you're able to overcome it. How much more you're able to overcome it. That's the difference. It's like what an aviation expert once told me. Everyone's afraid of flying. You're like, no, I'm not afraid of flying. I take flights all the time. You sure, but it's how much you're able to overcome it. Maybe you have the comfort in knowing, whereas some people are even turbulence scares them, right? Stage fright is always natural, right? It's always natural. I did stand up on Wednesday, and I until I went up, I was like, oh my god, is this a mistake? Is people gonna laugh? What am I doing? But it's always natural. It's in some ways it's like performance anxiety, right? Because of before a big game, for a sports star, you feel that. I think the first time I did it, I definitely obviously was a little more my baptism of fire. I was very grateful for the team on the tech side of things, because I'm not the most best in making slides. I'm like, what works better? Okay, this is my message. What slides? So they were very good on that element. And the second time I did it, also apart from the slides, what they really helped me on is because I used to speak very fast. Perhaps I'm still doing so. If I am doing speaking fast, let me know. The joke when I was in journalism school used to be they used to compare me and someone else who spoke very slowly. They're like, this person attended too many punctuation classes. Akshobh never attended any punctuation classes because there are no commas or pauses. I would just ramble on. And I think that
Akshab,
also
you
came.
were talking the same speed as I was listening to your talk at 1.5. So now you are speaking 1.5. So that's perfect for me.
Maybe I'll reduce it to point 0.5. No, I'll try. And I think it's my dad who's very sagacious, and he told me this. He's like, listen, it's because you have all these thoughts in your head, and your thoughts sometimes are racing faster than you can speak. But the funny part is, and I know no one's in anyone else's head, we're only in our own heads. When I would speak fast, obviously to me it sounds normal, right? Like, and sometimes it would just be get the thoughts out, get the words out. And especially when you're on stage, you have a time limit, you're like, oh, get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out. But so it was very important to have a speaker coach, if not for anything for me, to let you know, hey, this is where you pause, this is where you look around. And also because when you're practicing, you're only with yourself or maybe one person. But when you're in a live audience, you're like someone's laughing. You're like the audience is laughing, you tell something funny. You don't want to be like, okay, moving on to the next. You want to you let the moment sink in, right? In some ways, that's about stage thing. It's about delivery. You're supposed to let the moment sink in, let that, and I'm still getting better at it. But you have to react to the situation. The whole idea about doing theater and improv is coming up with things on the spot, but also understanding your audience as well at the same time. So I
How was
think
that
having a
practice like, Akshab? Because I was listening, and I was laughing with everybody at the same time, right? It either you are so good at that naturally, right, or you are good at that, but you also practice a lot, and you knew when people are gonna laugh.
Yeah, I think it's like with everything. Like I write a lot, so when you write your first draft, it's like word vomit, right? It's like ideas and you're just throwing it out there, right? Or it's like anything. Like even an artist, the first draft is never what they want. They rip, they tear, they're like because I think in some ways it's the perfection fallacy. You know, no one is perfect, but you try to get to the best form of perfection that you know. So when I was doing that, Ben, the first set of ideas was this, and obviously I was trying to share the ideas out because the good idea about having a speaking coach is they're your first cohort. They're the first line of defense to a larger public. If you are not able to sell those five, 4 or 5 or 6 people those ideas, you're not going to be able to sell it to 500 people in the audience, let alone to 5,000 or how many other people watch your talk afterwards, right? Or infinity is a number. So the idea for me was to be able to share my idea first to those people, and when they liked it, then I wrote it. They're like, okay, curate it this way. Start with something because when you write, also it's similar to public speaking, at least with a TEDx form, and you have to have a strong hook in the beginning, and your ending also has to be strong, right? And the middle also you've got to make sure it doesn't meander. It's very easy to meander, right? Like in some ways, like chess, good strong move, and you want to finish strong to win the game, right? It's the middle also that's important that people may not get, but like even if a pawn moves, it's supposed to set up to something else. So what is the idea behind that? And I think the beauty about TED, and this is very unusual to TED, there is no dais, right? There's no dais. There's and I memorized my thing. Normally I would have a good memory, so I don't even like cue cards. Sometimes people say don't hold or you hold cue cards for prompts, but I knew my speech well by heart because TED is like a red circle. So when I did it in Singapore in 2016, it was far bigger. It was a very nice red circle, and I was walking around it a lot. And I was walking a little too much because I was a little nervous because the lights were on me, and the camera was like trying to pan to catch me. But when I did it the second time in 2019, it's part of the TED thing. You have to have a red circle. It could be a tiny mat, a circular mat, or it could be like a large circumference where, like 20 people can sit and have a picnic, right? That I think that changes. That was a tiny one, right? So I couldn't move. In Singapore, I could move because I normally feel moving helps you kind of, you feel more. And the idea of TED, Ben, as you know, it's supposed to be a conversation. It's not supposed to be a lecture. It's not supposed to be pedagogy. It's not supposed to be, you're supposed to have a conversation. Socratic method, except that the other person doesn't speak back. 15 minutes, you're just talking. And I think what I had to practice was standing in for the second time, standing in one place and hand movements, hand gestures as well, like turning to the slide, referencing the slide, connecting, seeing if audience laughs, and then going on. But I also had to keep with the time limit because the TED has a time, like it has a time in front of you, like sometimes you see it and you're supposed to finish with the time frame. Sometimes you can go a little on board, depends on your how your TEDx organizers are, and they cut it down. But say if it's 15 minutes, it's got to be 15 minutes. If it's 10 minutes, it's got to be 10 minutes. So, and this is somewhere where your broadcast journalism training happens, because if you do a half an hour live show, you know in your head you have to stick to the time limit, and the producer gives you a countdown. So I think those were very unique to TED, and those helped me as well. And I always tell anyone, no matter how good you are as a speaker, always have, even if not a speaking coach, it's just someone to bounce ideas off. And I did it with stand up. None of the people I was talking to had done stand up before, but there were people who either knew what comedy looked like, what puns looked like, because I do a lot of puns, and this routine I did with a lot of puns, or who knew what an American audience wanted, because I was doing it in the US, and more importantly, who knew me and said, "This is where you need." So you need, it's kind of like the voice outside your head in some ways, right? Like, good coaches don't necessarily have to be former ball players, but you need, because even the best athletes in the world, the best performers in the world, they need someone to talk to and just tell them, this is what you're doing right, this is what you can do better, this is how it is. And I feel that that's very important. That's like your beta testing mark.
How much we were studying your, no, because you just said how important the audience is and understanding their audience. How much you were studying your audience to really understand, okay, this speech is going to connect with them, right, on a personal level. You said it's a conversation. I agree 100%, right? I'm in business of producing and helping people with books, and I believe that book is a one-sided conversation also, right? If you, it's not a conversation, it's a textbook, is boring, right? So how much you did of that, in order to understand, or you're just as brilliant as you are, you just knew it.
You're being far too generous, man. My parents won't give me these compliments. Now, I think the way I describe TED, and this is the way I think about it, and I've written a little blog post on it as well, on LinkedIn, just to share it with other people. I'm like, I want to invite you on a journey, right? The idea, like the good thing about storytelling is, the thing about a textbook is, right? The thing about a textbook is, it's theorems, it's concepts, it's, we know this, you have to learn it, you adapt to us. But that's not what storytelling is about. When you tell a story, the author doesn't assume you know the story. I'm talking about fiction in some ways, right? Like, obviously, non-fiction is different. Non-fiction, if you're going to go to a book on Cold War, it's assuming you know what the Cold War is, right? But in fiction, for example, like, say anything from fairy tales on, you don't know who Rumpelstiltskin is. So they tell you, once upon a time in a little village somewhere, so there was a princess, there was this, because they don't assume you know that. It's about, you invite people on a journey. You tell them why it's important, right? And I remember telling someone this, like, say if you're doing a TEDx on climate change, some people know it, some people don't. But tell them why it's important to you. Tell them, like, maybe you went to the Arctic and saw that polar bear haplessly, you know, trying to find ice to lie on, right? Like, just in some ways, it's supposed to be both sentimental, it's supposed to be profound, it's supposed to be inspiring, it's supposed to be motivational, it's even supposed to be humorous sometimes. That's the art of storytelling. Invite people on a journey, walk with them. How many times have you and I realized in school, some of the most brilliant people don't make very good professors, right? Because there's a gap. What they have here and how they deliver this. It's because the medium of storytelling, right? I mean, imagine if, I mean, obviously neither of us were around when Albert Einstein was around, but we can only assume he was a brilliant storyteller too, because people understood his concepts and were brilliant. But imagine if he just spoke about theory of relativity in ways that other people don't, because only he's the one who came up with it. Then most people won't be able to understand that, right? The idea is to get people to understand that. That's what makes great orators. Why do you think about great presidents like JFK, and or people who are not presidents but very inspiring, MLK? If you look at even presidents like Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, or whatever your opinion maybe of Donald Trump, is the ability to give a message and resonate with an audience, right? That's a lot of election 101. Both the brilliance of a good speechwriter and the power of an orator, where you capture sentiment, you capture moods. So with TED, I wanted to be telling people a story. And I think being a journalist and being a raconteur at heart, storytelling. Like, one of the things I loved doing also was when people visit cities I lived in. Like, I did it with Singapore, and I do it with Washington D.C., especially with a lot of history. Tell people stories. Tell people, oh, did you know stuff? It's not just, oh, this monument, things they could Wikipedia, things that they may not have known or may not have thought of, or may know and may not have thought of. Like this amazing TED talk done by a friend of mine. He spoke about China and why China and India are the most populous countries. We always knew they were the populous. That's no debate on it. The numbers are there. But we didn't think about why. And I was like, wow, yeah. Because sometimes we just take things for granted, but without knowing it. So that's the idea about TED. It's about the reason why there's no podium or dais is, it's meant you're not giving a lecture. It's also meant to not cover your body. You're out in the open. And that's a form of being bare naked in some ways. You're exposed. But it's about the vulnerability of that exposure and trying to invite people on that journey. It's about having a conversation. And that's the difference between pedagogy, where you're lecturing someone, because when a teacher's talking to students, it's not same, right? The teacher's there, it's one teacher to 500 whatever students in the class. One person the knowledge, they've come to learn from him, one way information traffic, unless it's a discussion based class. But this is not that. Even though people are not talking back in the audience at that point, it's you're still, the metaphor is that it's still a conversation, the fact that, but this is your side of the conversation. And have that conversation. So it's less about, it's, even if you have a complicated idea, it's how you break it down, it's how you get the relatability. Like if I say idea of a nation state, it's simple and also complicated. People are like, well, okay, I know what nation is, but what's the idea of a nation state? It's complicated. But that's how you find other stories to explain it, and find ways, find analogies, find allegories, find metaphors, which is what I think the beauty of sometimes of the English language is. There are so many of these avenues to try and explain a story.
Sure, I will tie my next question to this because you're talking, like a coach. You're like coaching me. How are you gonna do this, man? You know, once you're gonna do a TEDx talk, this is how you're gonna do it, right? And I like it. I'm wondering how many clients you're working with right now on a daily basis when you're coaching.
I don't coach. I should.
I know we don't, but you maybe should.
Well, I'll have to get your help now to start up a coaching client thing, and then it'd be good to make some money out of it once.
No, of course, of course. The only reason why I say this, because I'm hearing from you what really every speaker, more than that, a TEDx speaker, for the future, should really hear about. And I really like your that conversational angle and how it has to be a conversation rather than one-sided lecture. But okay, this is what you have to do. This is what I learned. This is my great story, and here's what it is, right? And people really should listen to your talk because it's not the usual TEDx talk. It's a very fascinating flow, and really, I think the brilliant way to insert jokes that and I like how you're inserting jokes as you're talking right now as well. I'm really absorbing these things. So Akshab, let me ask you this. Always people are wondering, especially those who are going through this challenge or or they're wondering how that challenge looks like. Now you went through everything. You performed on stage. What happens afterward? What happened afterward? Probably there are a lot of people contacting you about doing some comedy. Some people are talking to and inviting you to speak about from different conferences, speak about the nation, speak about the culture. Was that happening? Because this is my natural assumption after I listened to it.
In some ways, nothing that gets neon lights and my name out there. Well, maybe a third TED Talks may change that. It does what it does. It spurs a few things. So after I did my first major TED, what happened is I had the chance to moderate a series of panels in Singapore at top conferences, right? And that really inspired this idea. Like I think panels need to be curated much better, but that's a conversation for another day. But in the sense that when that happened, yes, within the small microcosm, my little universe in Singapore, yeah, like companies were calling me to moderate discussions. I was on panels. I was moderator on these panels, and I feel this when I was doing the TEDx thing better. What really showed people was the ability to have a conversation in an eclectic mix of subject. So I was able to moderate a lot of panels with very senior people and not be phased. Oh my goodness me, I'm not in their $1 million category. Maybe I should, but I'm not. But I'm not their stature yet. But at the same time, what it gave me the confidence was, all right, you're the expert, I'm the moderator. Let's have a conversation. So be it a leading person, at a Fortune 500 company talking about smart city or digital payments or technology of the future or AI, things which I don't necessarily have my immediate background in, but things that I've read about. And I'm like, all right, let's have a conversation because in this case, again, there's an asymmetry where I, as a moderator, realize that look, as a moderator, again, like the lessons for TED speaker, but the lessons for moderators. I think of it, and to use a football analogy or soccer for your American listeners, you are the defensive midfielder. You're not exactly the striker. You're supposed to pass the ball around and create the plays. So if I have a panel of 3 people, 4 people, I'm like, all right, this person has this knowledge and this expertise, that person has that person that. Let's segue from this to that. This person wants to talk about digital payments. Let's talk about digital payments. Oh, that person is a smart city expert. So let's talk about from digital payments, go about how smart city can build more technology. Let's talk to that person about AI and about how AI will tie into this. And, so just it's about creating a thread of conversations. So I think that ability with TED that created that platform, because TED's a global platform. I think it's the best thing any public speaker can do. And there are a lot of people I know who've still never done TED or have not done TEDx. And I'm trying to help some people do one, but they've been applying and not getting through. So sometimes it's luck where someone recognizes your potential and asks you to come and speak. Sometimes you just have to keep waiting. But that's the beauty about TED. There's no age group. You can be as young as, I don't know how young the youngest speaker is, maybe 8, 10, 11. I'm sure I've seen some kids that young. Sky's the limit, 101, and give your TED talk if you can. And I think because that's when you get a platform like TED, the world's your oyster. It opens up, and of course, there's a caveat, the difference between TED and TEDx. But of course, the sky's the limit after that, because when you do that, it's the most profound form of storytelling. I always tell people the reason why I love TED so much is it is both a narrow concept in just explaining it, but an infinite concept on what all it has inspired in conversations. Because you just think about it, it's like, oh, a platform where people come and speak is a conference where people speak, but it's not a conference like conference on it's everything. It's from scientific concept to inspirational storytelling to where comedians speak to beatbox artists do stuff. It is like it's almost like a Disneyland of ideas. So there's just no limit on it. It's the happiest place on earth when there's a TED conference.
You did it twice, so either you were very lucky, like lightning strikes twice kind of situation, but I don't think that's the case. I think they just see you and say, well, Akshobh delivered, he'll deliver again, and you're gonna go after that for the third time. Are you
Yeah,
planning the third one? You skipped. You said you had to skip. Are you planning
yes.
one for 2025 or 2026?
I hope so. I hope so. I really do. I really, really do. I think what happened is there's a great TEDx platform where I really think the organizers do a good job. They had invited me once just to fill up the form and we got the conversation, but it was around 2019, 2020. We all know what happened in 2020, so I think all of that we never got to a stage of are you going to be a speaker, but it probably looked promising. And then we revisited that talk sometime later, but that didn't materialize. So I'd love to do it because I think it's a great platform. And I think the ideas I have now are a little more different, and the whole thing about doing this is always do a new idea, because I think it's also a TED requirement that you cannot repeat. And even if you could, don't do that. Like I even did it in my comedy routine. Try something completely different. The whole thing, it's about like an author, right? Like, the what that the person can't write the same book over and over again. They can write different variation of ideas, but you are an esteemed author when you can, in the non-fiction space, when you can take new ideas. The whole idea about ideas is it's not supposed to be stale. New ideas are supposed to come about, challenge the old ones, make room for new ones. And I think inspiration comes in different ways. Like one of my former professors, Chris Miller, he wrote this great book called Chipor. When I met him and we were going to go to Russia on a work trip, on a policy trip together, he was a U.S. Russia expert, and I wrote about the fight for the world's most critical technology in semiconductors and chips and affecting geopolitics, and it just changed the landscape. That book is a New York Times bestseller. I would not have fathomed this when I met him in 2018, 2019. But of course, the world was different then. Maybe I don't know if he had this idea back then. I have to ask him. But he has changed his, like new ideas. That's the idea about being a researcher, right? New things come across your way. You think you learn new ways and new forms as well. And similarly, if you're a TEDx speaker and you've done it before, try doing something new this time, because what's going to inspire you in 5 years ago is not necessarily going to be the same, because you learn but you also unlearn, you make room for new ideas. So try and share that, because the chances are what you're going to talk about 5 years from now is a person you haven't met yet, a story you haven't encountered, a place you haven't seen, a book you haven't read, an experience you never had. So all of that is going to be the reason why no years look the same is because time never stays the same.
What is next for you, right? Because you are a new person now, right? Compared to your last talk in 19, your talk in 2016. What are you after right now? What's your next goal? What's your next challenge that you're going after?
Well, I've written a lot of op-eds, done a media interview, done podcasts like this. I think if I had to say in two ways, one is definitely want to get that book. I've had an idea for a book for a while, and I've written an article that galvanized the idea for the book, right? And I feel a lot of my best writing comes from very cathartic experiences. Because the reason I left the newsroom in some ways is I felt I'm more of an op-ed writer. I'm not a this president met this prime minister, they shook hands, they signed this deal, and that's it. Like that's what we call journalism, where you just churn out stories. But my idea is that okay, these two met. Why did they meet? What is the context? What does it mean 6 years down the line for a relationship between two countries? It's about a larger perspective. It's like the onion layer, peeling various layers, and going deeper into it. So for me, I want to write a book. The hard thing to get over is procrastinating, because and there's a great TED talk on procrastination. I recommend everyone to watch it. It's the art of procrastinating, and it's a beautiful the way he explains it. And I think everyone who sees this talk will understand both why we procrastinate and how to give a TED talk. And he does it in a very, very funny way. And it's about, because when there's no immediate deadline to it, because it's not like I have a publisher just yet. So no one's like, hey, where's your book? Where's your book? Where's your book? Where's your book? It's something like, oh, I should get it out. I should get it out. But, and then you realize the days are long and the years are short. If I ask you what you're doing on Thursday, you will know exactly what you're doing. But I ask you to remember this Thursday in 2027, unless something memorable happened, like with a birthday, with anniversary. Sometimes, unfortunately, it could be a bad day to remember. We remember those days in our lives also. You may not remember it. Like I ask you to remember August 25 in 2017. That may not resonate with you unless it meant something. But so don't lose sight of the bigger picture. And unfortunately, it's very easy to procrastinate. Sometimes we are our own demons. So to fight those demons and get to it, I feel that it's like a TED talk in some ways. It's a lot of preparation, but when you deliver it, those 15 minutes is profound. Because it's I always realize that people are rewarded in public for things they have mastered in private, right? Like it's we applauded Usain Bolt being able to do that 100 meters in under 10 seconds. But that's years and years and years and years and years of practice, right? So remember that there's the appreciating the drudgery of it, right? There were so many of the TED moments I did when I was just rehearsing, worried, is my idea big enough? Because I shared the stage with eminent economists, I shared the stage with professors. These guys are far smarter than me. And the people in the audience are guys who were in the US military for 20 years. They have no idea of nation states in different ways. They've read probably more books than I have. How do I and I think that's the beauty of TED. It's like this is my idea, this is my journey. I'm not saying this is my only, the be all end all of all, but this is one such conversation to a story, one such chapter in the larger story. So here's my chapter. So please read and review on your own time. I think that's what I loved about TED. So my next goal is to try and translate that some of those ideas into a book.
Right. So for everybody, right, December of 2025 is when Akshobh book is going live on Amazon.
Oh
So
my goodness
so
me, Ben.
he said he needs a deadline, right? So we're gonna create one right now. We have 11 months. Why not? It's gonna be 6 months. He's gonna put everything together really nicely. He's gonna make a beautiful story out of it. It's gonna be live here right before Christmas when people are looking to buy the most books. It goes live December 1st.
Well, I tell you what, Ben, if that comes true, you get the first signed copy. It'll
I would
probably
love to. I would
it's
love to.
probably going to be
I
you
would
and my
love to
parents who'll
receive
ask
a
for a
notification
copy.
from you. I will send you my address. I'm not gonna be where I am right now, but I'm gonna send you my address. I'm looking forward to receiving that. I'm gonna buy it. I want to buy it because I want to see it on Amazon. You might send me a copy before paying it.
Sure, sure. I think only you and my parents will want to read it. But yeah, no,
No,
absolutely.
that's not true, guys. Don't listen to that. It's the same thing as the other 22,000 people who listened to Akshob's second talk was, and within those people were me and Akshob's parents. So amongst the 22,000 people. So Akshab, I really appreciate you joining me today. I think one of the things that people should take from this conversation, because you gave a lot of great advice beyond you being such a great storyteller. You gave so much great advice on people for people who really are looking to share their message, possibly share their message on a TEDx stage, how to create that message, what does actually matter for people, how to grab audience attention, how to even get to that stage, how to get there twice. You have a person who has been there twice, right? And probably there's going to be some people who want to reach out and ask you for advice about different things. So Akshab, how people can reach you, what's the best way to connect with you if it's even possible? I don't know, maybe you're not available at all because you're busy.
No, No, absolutely. Well, you can reach me on Twitter at Akshobh, or drop me a line there, or you can drop me an email at my name at akshobh at gmail.com. It's very easy to get in touch with me. My name is literally one in a billion, literally. So, it's very, so yeah, drop me a line at akshobh at gmail.com, and let's have this conversation. And I'm very grateful to you, Ben, and, for your team, for being able to reach out to me. And, thank you for the opportunity. Like I said, we learn from each other. We learn when we have these conversations. And more importantly, someone like you, like Ted, you're doing the thing of giving people a platform to share those ideas.
Shab, it was a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to receiving my copy in December. That's all
Well,
I have to
perfect.
say.
I got to start writing right now after this call. So thank you.
You start that. Akshab, thank you, and take care.
Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it.